Oh, fantastic. So I'd like to take a moment and introduce our opening keynote, Erica Freudenberger, with the presentation, Measure Up Evaluation as a Springboard to Success. When the team reached out to Erica originally about this keynote, she responded, I do love evaluation. I measure everything. That is someone after our hearts here. She is a creative community builder who works with libraries to create community led change. She is the outreach, engagement, and marketing consultant at the Southern Adirondack Library System. She formerly led the Red Hook Public Library, which happened to be a finalist in Library Journal's Best Small Library Award. And she's a 2016 Library Journal Mover and Shaker. She's been an advisor to the Aspen Institute's Re-envisioning Public Libraries pilot of, by, for, and all, and the American Library Association's Libraries Transform Communities facilitation skills for small and rural libraries. In her free time, Erica creates bold, joyful, and experiential learning opportunities with organizations nationwide through Thriving Libraries LLC. Welcome, Erica.
Welcome. Good morning, everyone. I'm really delighted to be with you this morning and want to give a huge thanks to Samantha and Becky and Brenda and all the folks at the State Library of Iowa for allowing me to dazzle you with the wondrous world of assessment and providing us with the tools to aggregate, analyze, and communicate our success.
Do you
So,
want to get your slides pulled back up here as well?
oh, right. I'm looking at my slides, so I figure everybody can see them. So
They're
yeah.
such nice slides. Everybody does want to see them.
1 second, let me do that. Okay, there we go. And now everybody can see them. Terrific.
Beautiful. Thank you.
So this morning I am joining you from my home in Catskill in New York's Hudson Valley. And I know that when people hear New York, they tend to think of the city because that's where the excitement is, but the majority of our state is rural, very rural. This is the picture on the screen is down the road from where I live in the Hudson Valley, so you can get a sense of what I'm talking about and where I am in the world. I live in the Catskill Mountains, but I work in the Adirondack Mountains. The Catskills are nice and soft and round mountains, and the Adirondacks are more pointy, basically, is the difference. Um, I, as Bonnie said, I work at the Southern Adirondack Library System, which is a consortium of 34 independent libraries, the majority of which are small and rural. Our smallest library serves a community of 415 people, which has grown because somebody just had a baby in Racket Lake, and our largest serves 55,000 in Glens Falls. And that is what we would consider like a large urban library. We have two of them. One serves like 35,000, the other serves 55,000. Everybody else serves much smaller communities. One of the many things that I really love about my job is strategic planning. I work with our member libraries to create community-based plans that are rooted in the aspirations of our friends and neighbors and that reflect our shared values. One of the reasons why I really love strategic planning is because it gives us a chance to dream together while bridging the gap between your library's current and its desired state and creating a framework that answers four questions. Where's the library now? What is our preferred future? How do we get there? And how do we know we're successful? And that final question is where assessment comes in. It's a way to communicate to our team, trustees, and stakeholders that we're doing what we said we were going to do, and we're delivering programs and services consistent with our library and our community's aspirations and reflect our shared values. By the way, I just realized I know that sometimes I tend to speak very quickly, so if I am speaking too fast, let me know and I will do my best to slow down. Oh, and thank you for the shout out about our Facebook page. So assessment is a way to communicate to our team, trustees, and stakeholders that we're doing what we said we would do. And I just said that, so we're going to go on. We often think of assessment as a final step done once the planning process is complete, but it's really important to establish clear metrics during the planning process so that we can measure our progress, assess our ability to achieve our desired goals, and identify problems before they arise, ideally, and pivot as we need to. So today I'm going to cover why we assess stuff, why it matters when we assess stuff, what we measure, and how we can use that information. And I just want to say assessment for me is it's really important to be um, it's kind of a regular reflective practice that incorporates deep listening um, and problem solving with your community. So that's my approach to assessment. So one of the reasons why I love assessment is because it helps me understand how effective my work is and the impact that it makes on our community. It doesn't always give me the answers I want, which is unfortunate, but it's a tool that helps me optimize my performance and determine where I can best put my time, energy, and resources. Assessment is an ongoing process. Convening regular check-ins allows us to respond nimbly to changing conditions like unexpected challenges or new opportunities. It also holds us accountable to the public, ensuring that we're good stewards of public funds and that the community is benefiting from the work we do. We use assessment as a tool to track our progress and provide information for intentional, evidence-based decision making. And as we think about what we want to assess, we need to consider what impact are we hoping to make? What do we need to do to achieve that intended and desired impact? And how do we know if we're succeeding? Determining metrics during the planning process establishes the parameters for evaluation, which, in addition to tracking the library's process, is the basis for things like the director's evaluation by the trustees and set specific objectives for the library team to achieve. The director can then use those objectives as part of evaluation of your team, which I realize in many of our libraries, I should say, our directors are part-time and they may have one or two other part-time people with them. So we're not talking about big departments. Um, I mentioned earlier that assessment holds us accountable. This is really important because keeping your word is the best way to build trust. You would be amazed at the number of relationships and collaborations I've had simply because people know I will do what I said I would do. It's a very low bar, which is the kind I like best, right? By analyzing performance metrics, we can identify gaps between what we planned and what actually happened, and then make necessary adjustments to ensure that our actions continue to align with the goals we established in our plan. It also helps us overcome any inherent cognitive bias, like the recency effect, right? The tendency to select the option presented most recently because it's fresh in your mind, or Occam's razor, which is the tendency to assume the most obvious decision is the best decision. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's not, right? Inertia bias is the tendency to select options that allow us to think, feel, and act in familiar ways because it's comfortable, which is, I can understand the pull of that. And finally, there's confirmation bias when we're validating a viewpoint, but we're validating that only using information that supports our viewpoint, right? So assessment is a really great tool for giving us a bird's eye view of our organization and building a culture of excellence by identifying areas for improvement or adjustments in resource allocation. The information we collect is a really powerful tool for data-backed advocacy for our libraries. So, as I mentioned earlier, we want to develop metrics as part of the planning process. As you're thinking about the coming years, how are you going to know that you're achieving your goals as you build out the activities to support your objectives? Will you use quantitative data, like the number of people who come to programs? Is it tied to your circulation? Or will you choose qualitative data like stories and anecdotes to paint a picture of how the library's plan reflects and incorporates community aspirations? Communication early and often is key to successful evaluation and understanding if the plan is having its desired impact. I recommend that our library directors incorporate reporting on the progress and meeting objectives as part of their monthly board meetings. Remember, trustees are going to use the strategic plan to evaluate the director's ability to meet the established goals and objectives. And then in turn, the director uses it to evaluate their team to demonstrate how and what they're accomplishing and how it supports the goals that everybody's focused on. When we incorporate assessment metrics when we're reporting to the community, funders, or municipalities, we have evidence of our success. That way they don't have to take our word for it, right? Because we have a vested interest in telling a great story. We can demonstrate that we have hard data to support our claims and back up our decision making. Regular updates also help us navigate a rapidly changing landscape. Um, because a strategy that we initially had may no longer be effective. What we learn from evaluation will inform whether we need to make changes in response to, the economy, our community, the profession. We're we're in a time where things are just happening fast and furious, and this gives us a way to nimbly respond to what's going on. When we integrate this information into our regular director's reports, it allows us to be more agile and respond more quickly to any new circumstances. This helps keep everybody focused and aligned with our objectives and provides data to improve our decision making and keeps us moving forward. I understand that everybody has a ton on their plates and that burnout is real. So if monthly updates feel impractical or burdensome, um, create an assessment calendar, right? You might choose to do it every other month or quarterly. I would suggest that you don't wait an entire year to do the check-in because then you're not responding in real time and things that you could have adjusted, it may be more difficult to do. So try and keep up with it and don't don't leave it to the last minute. I like to think of it as kind of a pulse check. We want to ensure that things are going to plan, and if they're not, figure out why. If you do create an assessment calendar, share it with the whole library team, including trustees and the friends and key stakeholders that are involved in the process, so everybody can contribute feedback and have a voice in decision making. And I want to say here that I understand that inviting stakeholders or community members to participate in this process may initially be scary, right? We're professionals, we're experts at aggregating, sorting, and analyzing material. Inviting others in puts us in a vulnerable position because we're learning alongside them. And even though it may not feel comfortable at first, you'll see the benefit of differing expertise relatively quickly. You'll also find out that it's not nearly as frightening as you initially thought. And I just want to say here that those of us at small and rural libraries have a huge advantage over our counterparts in larger libraries because we tend to be in ongoing collaborations with much of our community, if not all of our community, because we have to get creative to make things happen with limited resources. And because the scale of our communities is smaller, so we tend to regularly interact with many of our friends and neighbors, right? You go to the grocery store and somebody's going to try and hand you a book to return. That's just the way it goes. An additional benefit is Linus's law, which is given enough eyeballs, all bugs are shallow, right? If we have a wide range of expertise contributing to the assessment, we have a chance to consider multiple approaches that may not have occurred to us initially. That being said, choose participants strategically and ensure that the community is represented in the process. Yes, Becky, exactly. I do think that small rural libraries have an advantage in innovation and agility, just because we can move fast and see if things work or if they don't, which is amazing. Um, When I was a library director, we prided ourselves on having an abundance of hybrid vigor, which I know is a term mostly used with dogs or other animals, but we adopted to reflect our approach, which resulted in improved informants. It also reflected our staff, right? We didn't have librarians on staff. We had a biologist, a musician, a nurse, an MBA. So everybody that was involved on our team was bringing very different expertise and language to the table, which I think made us come up with ideas that I wouldn't have thought of on my own. You want to be sure that the metrics you choose to evaluate your objectives align with your plan, and again, reflect your shared values with the community and be feasible. Please don't set unrealistic goals. Consider your library's capacity and resources and establish a timeline and benchmarks that make you stretch but are not daunting. As you approach the end of the plan's time frame, so if you're planning for 3 or 5 years as you're getting there, take some time to review the evaluation process as a whole, and then use what you've learned to determine what metrics are going to be helpful for future plans, like what worked, what didn't work, what would be a better way of approaching it. We learn as we go. Um, so evaluation is a really great reality check, and sometimes reality is harsh. I want to take a moment to say that despite impeccable planning, you may not be able to fulfill your goals and objectives. In 2019, I spent a year working with our member libraries to update their strategic plans. A lot of time and terrific work were done, and everybody was super excited about accomplishing their goals in the coming years. As you may remember, 2020 did not go according to plan. Social isolation and several months of closed libraries rendered the plans that we made 8 months before pretty much useless. Things had changed dramatically. We couldn't obtain the objectives we had laid out. Our libraries had to reassess the new landscape and determine a new path forward, which is okay. If things go awry in the process of implementation, and it doesn't have to be a global pandemic, it could be something else. Um, you can modify or revise your plan. Strategic plans are living documents, not something you spend a couple of months on and then put on a shelf. It's a guide to help us navigate a path forward and should be referred to when you're planning programs, developing policies, allocating resources, and hiring new team members. If during the strategic timeline, new opportunities or partners are available, or if there's a shift in leadership, it gives us a chance to recalibrate in real time. Um, the Harvard professor Clayton Christensen did a study and found that 93% of organizations with successful strategic plans and strategies pivoted away from their original strategic plans. So if you need to change things up, you're not alone and you're in good company. There are endless things we can measure. And as a librarian, I know that there is nothing more we don't like anything more than data, right? So we have to be really intentional about what we measure to make choices that reflect our capacity while still being meaningful to those outside our profession. We don't want to get distracted by aggregating more data than is necessary. And trust me, I understand the appeal, but we have to try and really focus on what matters. I am all too willing to dive headfirst down the rabbit hole and follow all sorts of data everywhere, but it's not really productive. So please don't do that. And remember, as much as our plans help us navigate the future, they're also outward facing documents the public can use to understand our priorities. So we want to find metrics that are not just library centric. We want to clearly communicate how the community benefits from the work that we're doing. So start by considering the community's aspirations and our role in supporting those. So, what are we trying to accomplish? What story do we want to tell? And then think about what metrics do we need to tell that story and make a compelling argument for our library. Any metrics that we choose should be clear, precise, and ideally a mix of quantitative and qualitative data, which I will return to multiple times in this talk and talk more about in a bit. As you think about what to evaluate, create a set of standards to measure your progress and goals. You want to include realistic milestones for each objective to track progress because you can't accomplish everything all at once, and you're not meant to, right? Strategic plans span years, so include a time frame for each objective. If you can't achieve the goal in the allotted time frame, figure out if you need to adjust the time frame or if you need to revisit the objective. It's okay to make changes. Just be sure to communicate any changes you're making to all, first to your trustees, but also to all library stakeholders. When possible, establish consistent standards. For example, if the objective is to meet the community's educational needs during the school year, you might measure the number of people who attend programs, their feedback from their programs, circulation statistics of titles supporting the school's curriculum, the number of tutoring sessions, and should you be lucky enough to have one, the booking of meeting rooms. When crafting objectives, I tend to reverse engineer the process. I think about the community's aspirations and what we're trying to achieve. I then plan how the library can work with others to make those aspirations a reality and what metrics are going to demonstrate how effective we've been. As I said before, I always recommend a mix of quantitative and qualitative data because different data speaks to different people in different ways. People process information in all sorts of ways, and we want to find a manner in which we can spark their interest. Statistics and numbers are going to impress some people, but others prefer to hear really great story about the library's impact on people's lives. So there's lots of ways to collect information. Your chosen method should reflect and be appropriate for your evaluation. If you're looking for statistical information, you might collect data through surveys or run statistical reports through your integrated library system. If you want to tell a story, you might convene focus groups, conduct interviews, and gather anecdotes from people who use your services and attend programs. Integrating data about cost, attendance, public feedback, and community benefits into one package can make for an incredibly compelling story about the library. And again, if you didn't achieve what you planned during the analysis, it's okay. This is the purpose of evaluation. All strategic plans have a degree of risk. Or if they don't, you're not dreaming big enough, right? So think about how much the library and community may benefit from the proposed risk. And if it's a potentially high reward, it may be worth the risk. So when I was the director of the Red Hook Public Library, which served 1,800 people in the village of Red Hook, a big piece of our initial strategy was sustainable funding for our mid-19th century octagonal building. I was the library's first full-time employee, and I had a team of 4 part-time people. We had a budget of $165,000 a year, and before I arrived, the trustees had just begun a $600,000 building project that was financed out of our operating budget. I will admit, I have always been mathematically challenged, but even I knew this was a course for disaster, right? The building project included creating a new children's library on the garden level, which is my euphemism for the basement. We would need to increase staffing to cover 2 floors of that were being used, and also have additional costs because we had installed a new elevator to make the building more accessible, and we had to, heat and light the entire space. The only way forward was to go to the public to ask for a budget referendum, because that's the way. It was an amazing building. It was also haunted. That's another story. So I should back up and say that in New York, one of the ways we can fund our libraries is going directly to the public. We can also get funding from our towns. Some libraries choose to do that, and some get funded from their school districts. We went directly to the public. Unfortunately, we decided to do that in the year that the governor implemented a 2% tax cap, which meant that any request for public money could not exceed that unless the board voted to go over it. Since this was a new and somewhat controversial law, it was a very hot topic. But 2% of $165,000 is $3,300, which was not going to cover all of our new expenses. I think you're right, Martha. So we decided to ask for a 50% increase. As you might imagine, we got a lot of press. No one could imagine that anybody would be foolish enough to ask for that much money, but we knew what we needed and we decided to roll the dice. I'd love to report that I was confident that the community would support us, but that was not the case. I'd been in the position for just about 6 months when we went out for the referendum. I was working on raising the profile of the library in the community, which had a reputation for being a profoundly unpleasant place that people avoided. I'm happy to report that our referendum passed after an incredibly stressful election day. It happened that our elections take place in the school, which is surrounded by farmland, and there was a massive fire on the farm that day. So it was incredibly smoky, and we were worried people wouldn't turn out. Anyway, it worked out. So sometimes taking a huge gamble is really worth it. So if your planned strategy doesn't match or exceed your goals, consider revisiting them. And then also think about if anything significant has changed, either internally or externally. And what has changed, and was it due to a lack of resources, staff, or time? We're always taking in all the data that we take in helps us to learn, to adjust, and adapt. And again, strategic plans are not written in stone. They're a living document that guides us, not a cudgel we can use to beat ourselves up, although I know how tempting that is. So please check to ensure that the established objectives are still relevant and internally consistent. This is a really great chance to bring your team together to brainstorm how the original goal could be met, or if it needs to be adjusted or scrapped altogether to set a new one. If you decide to make adjustments, consider, does the new goal reflect your library's values and policies? Are there new opportunities or factors to support the revision of current objectives? And are the objectives achievable with your available resources? And let me be clear, when I talk about resources, yes, I mean money, but I'm also a big fan of appreciative inquiry and asset mapping. So I also include people's talents, creativity, and expertise, physical spaces that we can use in the community, because we were in, a 4,000 square foot octagonal library, but that 4,000 feet was split up among 3 floors. And every room was an odd shape. We didn't have any room that was square, right? It was all very odd shapes. So we wanted to look for spaces that could hold a lot of people. We were also looking for other institutions to partner with, like our school district and Bard College, which was nearby, social clubs, like the garden clubs, and connections and networks. And I can confidently say that connections and collaborations and those relationships are going to take you much further than money will. Although you need both, but you want to be sure to cultivate those relationships. Once you've finished your evaluation and made any necessary adjustments, start thinking about the goals and objectives for the next evaluation. Because yes, this is an iterative process. I really like it because I think of it like a puzzle. Like, what do we need to bring all of our evil plans together? And then what can we do once we accomplish them, right? Then we get to have an opportunity to have an even bigger dream. So, excuse me, what should we measure? And well, it depends, right? If we're reviewing internal objectives, they could include things like staff performance, resource allocation, staffing levels, and how we share information with the public. As I mentioned earlier, a strategic plan is establishing benchmarks for performance. Ideally, each objective in your plan includes activities that designate specific people or departments to be responsible for them. And in some cases, I know the person responsible for them may be the same person who's the director and is doing all the things. Circulation, reference questions, access to databases, and attendance at programs are all great ways to assess performance. External objectives directly impact and benefit the community, making positive changes in people's skills, knowledge, attitude, behavior, or condition of life status. So metrics might include public program attendance, collaborations and partnerships, the number of people who volunteer, and or the number of people who have found jobs after resume review or learned a new language through Mango. And here's where I want to just mention really quickly one thing about privacy. Although most evaluations, you know, don't cause any harm to participants, if you are audio or video recording people in order to have like more accurate notes, or if you are doing virtual focus groups on Zoom and you have the transcripts, be sure that you're handling that responsibly and that we're not collecting any personally identifiable information so we don't inadvertently invade people's privacy in ways that may make them uncomfortable. So if during the planning process we're gathering demographic information or the names and emails of people responding to digital surveys or participating in focus groups or program assessments, we're responsible for that. Protecting user privacy and confidentiality is one of our profession's core values, and we need to uphold this in the data collection process. So if we don't need to identify who's responding, don't ask for it. Allow people to opt out of data collection and don't collect information that's like nice to know, but not necessary. A best practice is to collect anonymous or aggregated data that's not tied to anybody's personal information. If you do collect personal information, please have a written data management plan explaining what information you're gathering, where and how it's going to be stored, who's going to have access to it, and when it'll be erased. So who is responsible for measuring all of these things? And again, I just want to stress it's really important to include multiple stakeholders, both internal and external, in the process. Each has a vital role to play in deciphering the data and will help shape the way forward. But not everybody is evaluating the same thing, right? So when the board and the personnel committee evaluates the director, progress on the strategic plan is one of the factors that they take into consideration, but it's not the only one. While they incorporate what they've heard from the public and data from assessments, they're also looking at operations, including how well things run, how people are managed, the creation and implementation of the budget, and if the director is meeting their expectations. But using data helps to support a more objective, evidence-based evaluation. That's not about feelings or how I think about you, which sometimes small communities are wonderful. But sometimes people have known and had beef with each other since they were 5, and we don't want that to impact how we're thinking about each other. The director then evaluates staff members based on which parts of the plan they're responsible for and the community's library usage, as well as customer service, interaction with colleagues, and their contributions to the library. Often when we communicate with the public, we use information like library circulation or door count, but that only really accounts for a small part of activity taking place in a library. And while it's really important to share that information because those numbers tell a story about library usage, if we only tell that story, we're not doing our libraries justice, and we may not be effective in building buy-in with our community. When I started out, I relied really heavily on statistics because that's what I thought I needed to do. But after a couple of public presentations where I watched people's eyes glaze over, I came to the realization that most people really don't care about how many items we circulate, right? We're using metrics that are meaningful to us because it's a part of our daily lives, but that doesn't speak to other people. If we're using those metrics to tell our story, we have to integrate and explain why increased circulation, Wi-Fi usage, or attendance at library programs matters to the community. And to be clear, it does, and it's a really compelling argument. Yes, 234 people used Wi-Fi last year. That doesn't mean a whole lot as its own thing. But what are those numbers telling us? Are people using the library in new or different ways? Are there anecdotal stories to bring the statistic to life? Like, are kids using the Wi-Fi to complete homework assignments? Has a patron used it to access job applications and managed to get a job because of that? Think about how to provide an accurate picture of how the public uses and benefits from the library. Excuse me. I hope that everybody includes evaluation as part of your regular public programming, because that feedback is critical to understand how our programs and services are being received and ensure that they result in positive changes, learning, or other benefits because of our efforts. When it comes to evaluating public-facing objectives, be sure to include trusted stakeholders, including the friends of the library, to assess the impact in programs and services that are making in the community. They have the benefit of getting, unfiltered feedback from their friends and neighbors, which can be very valuable. So, as we prepare to begin assessing our library's objectives, we need to overcome any assumptions we're bringing with us and bring with us an attitude of being strategically curious, thinking creatively, examining the underlying beliefs and assumptions, and bringing our authentic selves to the process. We're not just coming as library professionals, but as people who live in the world and understand how the work we are doing is impacting others. This approach requires both humility, but also confidence. And so, as you're thinking about it, decide who you want to be part of the team that's analyzing a particular objective. Include anybody that's responsible for its implementation and invite everybody to participate in a reflective session. Before the team meets, collect all relevant documentation to share and distribute before everybody comes to the meeting so that they have a chance to review the data and reflect on its meaning. This might include the library's annual report, financial information, or any strategic or risk documents that you have. And just a quick note here, we tend to be a profession of introverts. So giving people the data they need to evaluate an objective before the meeting is really critical. Introverts, and I speak as an introvert, need time to think and reflect before taking action. Giving everyone time to reflect on the data and come to the meeting with ideas about how to evaluate those objectives successfully is going to help you in that meeting to be more effective and productive. At the meeting, take time to review the shared values, vision, and mission statements that you've outlined in your strategic plan. Then review the goals and objectives and identify who is responsible for implementing the activities that are defined that you have decided to review that day. It's important for everybody to understand their role and the timeline that's been established for implementation. Excuse me one second. Explain how everybody's work ties into the larger picture, any expectations you have, and how people will be held accountable for achieving these goals. This approach sets up the staff for success and builds buy-in, which is critical to realizing the plan. As you're reviewing the data, think about any new opportunities or challenges that have arisen since its inception, or any strategic assumptions that have changed and how those might impact the plan. Consider, for example, are any new or previously unidentified internal or external concerns impacting your progress? Are you hitting the milestones you've established? If not, why not? Before the meeting ends, confirm everybody's responsibilities and the expectations people hold so everybody's on the same page. It's great to hold people accountable by embedding the plan's objectives into performance measures and job descriptions at all library levels. As you review the data, you may realize that the library needs to make some changes, which sometimes causes discomfort, and I get it. Change can be really scary and disruptive and may cause pushback. So please make time to thoroughly explain the process, review the plan, and explain what the library's day-to-day work looks like and the timeline for implementation to help relieve any concerns. Once everybody's up to speed, ask what part of the plan they're excited about or hold particular interest in. I'm a big believer in that everybody is good at something, and if we align what people are great at and what they're interested in, they're going to be successful. So if somebody's passionate about some part of the plan, create space for them to help implement and own the plan, right? The other thing that we want to do is to support our team in implementing the plan by providing adequate professional development and training so that they have the necessary skills and knowledge to tackle their new roles. Ongoing learning ensures that the team is competent and confident in their work. Engage your stakeholders by inviting anyone invested in the library's strategic goals to take part in its assessment. Make space for them to take ownership of and contribute to the plan's implementation. And I know I've mentioned it before, but I want to reiterate that effective communication is the secret sauce to assessment. By communicating early and often, everybody involved, including trustees, friends, volunteers, and community partners, gets to play a role in the library's success. And people love that. It feels good. It feels good to be making positive change, right? And it ensures that the shared expectations are understood and how they can contribute to the plan's shared values, vision, and mission. This continuous communication helps maintain alignment, manage expectations, and address any concerns or issues. And finally, remember that the plan is not a set of tasks, but a vision to position the library as a sustainable community resource. You're modeling a way to practice continuing improvement, which is going to result in positive outcomes for your community. It's a really exciting opportunity for growth and positive change. So now let's get into data. We use two types of data to evaluate the library's programs and services. Qualitative data is non-numerical and includes things like attitudes, experiences, and behaviors that are collected through observation, like one-on-one interviews, focus groups, conversations, anecdotes, discussions that happen after a program, all of those things. It emphasizes a depth of understanding, and it's a way of understanding complex phenomena rather than how well the data generalizes to the larger population. Quantitative data can be categorized into numerical patterns, which are often used to make comparisons between categories. So statistical tests are used to establish the relationships between variables to generalize to the larger population. Both data sets are really important. Each plays a different role in communicating with the public, so you want to be sure to incorporate both data types when reporting. We also want to be mindful again that people respond to data differently. I love a great story, but I can really quickly lose the thread when a number enters the picture. Numbers are not a language that I necessarily understand. But when I make presentations to the Rotary Club, I know they prefer statistical data. That's what makes sense to them. So earlier I talked about reverse engineering, and here's what it might look like. During planning, the library heard that the community wanted to create a welcoming atmosphere for all. To meet that objective, diverse community-led programs were created that invited the public to share their expertise. To find out if that was successful, we'd want to use both quantitative and qualitative data. The quantitative data would include the number of programs, the number of community volunteers who led programs, the number of attendees, and maybe a survey about, what people thought about the programs or what programs they'd like to see in the future, something like that. We also want to get the qualitative data, which are, as I mentioned before, the anecdotes that people are sharing either during or after a program, make time to debrief with participants afterward, provide a questionnaire with open-ended responses. One really great resource that I love to use, and which I will talk about later, is Project Outcome, which was developed by the American Library Association. It's a really great tool and helps to put all this information together. Once we've gathered all the data and adjusted our plan as necessary, it's time to share what we've learned and demonstrate how we've responded to what we heard during the planning process. libraries tend to be really great at hiding our light under the bushel, as my mother says. And we need to stop doing this because we do terrific work and we are incredible at maximizing the resources we're given. I always say, like, we can stretch a penny till you can see through it, right? Assessment helps us tell a great story about our library. It gives us data that instills confidence in how we're working with our community toward a shared future. By incorporating a mix of both visual and text elements like pie charts and narratives or direct quotes of participants and stakeholders, people get a full picture of the library's work, like both the human and the technical side. So when we go to the public or a municipality for funding, we have information that validates our work and demonstrates our very careful stewardship of resources. When we ask our legislators, I can say the word, and representatives for support, we have compelling stories to share about how we support our community and work for positive change. We want to make our story memorable so that friends and neighbors can share what they've learned and help spread news about the library through word of mouth advocacy. Internally, it provides a way for staff to shine and step into new roles by taking on responsibility for the plan's success and being recognized for it. Oh, I'm sorry, just saw that Becky said that there's going to be a panel presentation on project outcome. Terrific. It is. I love that tool, but I'll get back to that. So again, as I was saying, internally assessment allows our staff to shine. It gives them an opportunity to take on new roles, and it also builds new skills as staff learn how to gather different types of data effectively, analyze it, and implement responses to it. And Mary says quantitative data is what I used to report to the city council initially, but the eye glaze is real. Yes, it is. Now she starts with a story and tries to show how the library is valued by patrons. It is a difficult balance and it's tricky, but once you get it right, it's incredibly powerful. So the evaluation process is iterative, which means that we're always doing it. um, and should be repeated, I think early and often, not only when the strategy fails to meet objectives, but also as part of a proactive and continuous improvement approach to strategic management. So, in practice, evaluation provides a common language for your team to express and embody the library's mission, vision, and values, empowering everybody to confidently advocate on its behalf. It also makes program assumptions explicit and accountable. It promotes communication, clarity, and transparency, supports continuous improvements, and ensures alignment of goals, activities, and outcomes. Assessment helps determine how we can make every action count, be intentional in our decision making to ensure that we are doing things that make sense. Because sometimes we continue to do things that are like well past their sell-by dates. And we want to make sure that we're getting the best bang for our buck and providing our community with a tremendous return on investment, right? So as you progress through the assessment progress and celebrate wins, be sure to celebrate your wins because I think that that's not something we're always great at. And you want to celebrate any win, no matter how small. Acknowledging objectives helps build momentum in implementing the library's plan and motivates everybody involved to continue their work. Recognize and reward people's achievements as they contribute to realizing the plan's established goals. It's a chance to build a really positive, enthusiastic culture. I know that the assessment process may sound intimidating initially, right? It takes time, effort, and dedication, but it does yield really terrific returns. By anchoring our advocacy with the evidence that we've gleaned from our assessment, we can model how to be a reliable institution that is open and available to all. As we watch our plans turn into action, we can celebrate our progress and ensure that our libraries remain relevant, responsive, and resilient. So, If all of this sounds overwhelming, fear not. There are lots of tools to help you navigate the process. I've shared them on this slide, and Samantha will have, or has, and I think already has shared the slide deck. So don't feel like you have to write this all down. It's right there for you. And I know it's a lot. One form of evaluation is called benchmarking, which compares similar institutions and how they work and what their metrics are. If this is of interest to you, the Institute of Museum and Library Services is a really terrific source of statistics because they're gathering them from libraries all across the country. And they organize them and they can be searched by library, giving you a chance to see how similar libraries are performing. The Public Library Association recently, it's only been a couple of years, I think, created Benchmark, Library Metrics and Trends, to provide data visualizations that help libraries compare inputs and outputs to peers and national data. One note, there is an annual fee to use Benchmark's data dashboards that incorporate data from multiple sources and create customized reports, but there is also a part of the tool that is free to access, and that provides a summary page with selected metrics and visualizations for the library, its primary peer group, and libraries nationwide. It incorporates any responses that it submitted to any past PLA or Public Library Data Service surveys. It gives you a chance to participate in any open surveys so you can share your library service. And it gives you access to all the data they collect, the surveys they have, and also information about how to use the tool. And I know you're going to hear about project outcome later, so I'm not going to go too deep into my deep and abiding passion for it. It's a terrific free toolkit that is a really great way to show the impact of library service and programming. It's been around for nearly a decade, and you can choose what kind of survey you need and collect information online or in person. It generates really spiffy looking reports that make you look super professional. And for somebody who does not have those kind of skills, I appreciate it. And it also adds to the knowledge base about the importance of libraries, which helps us advocate on a national scale. The American Library Association created What's Your Library's Worth, which is a worksheet that lets you calculate the value of library materials and services in monetary terms, which is terrific when you make a report to the community and want to be able to share the community's return on investment, or ROI, which I found to be an incredibly effective tool to demonstrate our value. So one year, as I was making my report and presentation to the Red Hook Village Board about the progress we're making on our plan, and our intention to request additional resources to support the plan, there were two kind of cranky old men in the back of the room who reminded me of Waldorf and Statler, and I know that's a dated reference, who called out unprompted that we were just another government sinkhole. And at that point, our budget was maybe like a little bit more than 200,000 a year, which, like, to my mind, it's like we're not really a sinkhole, we're more of a divot. I aspire to be a sinkhole, but not yet. But thanks to the data we had collected, I explained that the community was getting a 600% return on investment, reflecting our circulation and programming statistics. I could very confidently make the case that if you knew you were going to get a 600% return on an investment, chances are you'd jump at the opportunity, which allowed me to position the library as a really great investment for the community. And finally, the Research Institute for Public Libraries is a project that was launched by the Colorado State Library, and has national and regional trainings. And I believe that those are mostly underwritten through funding, so there's no cost to participate. And I think they do both in person and virtual. And they also have on their site webinars about how to aggregate and use public data, which is helpful. So I know that that was a lot of information in a short time period, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Oh, Michelle. Yes. And let me just say that I think that there's nothing magical necessarily about an MLIS degree, and that everybody who's working in a library has strengths and is bringing their own life experience to it, which is really important. Oh, you were just at the Mid York site. Yeah. Oh gosh, yes. Does anybody have any questions? If not, that's okay. If later on you're thinking about stuff, oh, a little bit of the challenge using multiple. Yeah. Okay, so the challenges of using a multi-story library in a small town. Um, you have a second floor that you want to make use of, but how do you assess the cost of staffing additional spaces and the number of people using it? So that is a great question because I was at the Red Hook Library for 6 years, and we went from having one floor to eventually using all three floors just because we were doing so much stuff and we wanted to be able to welcome as many people as we could into the library. And what I did was I thought about, how many hours are we open? When are we planning programs that are going to take place in these spaces? So how much staff do we have? I also, for safety's sake, I never wanted to just have, and this I know is something that we only accomplished because we were able to have a budget referendum. So it was a bit of a luxury, but I never wanted to have only one person in the building at a time. I wanted to always have at least two people, ideally at least two people on each floor. So I just figured out what that would cost, multiplied it by how many hours we were open and when um, the different floors needed to be staffed. So the first floor in the children's library were open, all the same hours, all the regular library hours. The third floor was open, like mostly for programs that happened either later in the day or like during our summer reading program where we're doing like when we used every single space. The trick to be able to hosting programs for me was to partner widely in the community and to really look towards using community spaces. We used the firehouse, we used the Elks Lodge, we used the Masons Temple, like we used the parking lots, like whoever would have us, we would go to wherever people would host us. And we also did stuff. Well, I imagine I'm still being cursed out for my incredible idea of having a children's story time in a candy store. And yeah, parents never did thank me for that. I think it started off great, but by the end, everybody was bouncing off the walls. Um, let's see. So I hope that answers your question. I know that's a long way around, and I don't know where we are on time. Oh,
We've got a couple minutes.
okay,
I
good.
wanted to say that I loved your comment that your strategic plan is not written in stone.
Mm-mm.
So as we think about trying to say like, okay, were we successful? Were we not? I also liked your point about like, okay, was it a bad goal or was it a bad measurement? And or bad's strong word there maybe, but do we need to adjust our goals or do we need to adjust what we're measuring? So I appreciated both of those, and then also the encouragement that your strategic plan is not a cudgel.
No, it's something that really should. I really love strategic planning because it gives us a chance also to reflect on what we've done and to recognize the excellent work we do. Because I think, especially in small and rural libraries, we are moving very quickly and we're doing one thing and then the next thing and then the next thing. And we're not making time to sit back and think about all that we've done and all that our work means to our community. So um, I like having that time to reflect and making that time to reflect, right? Putting it on the calendar so that we have that opportunity. Um, oh, Dawn loves the candy store idea. Okay, if you want to become the scourge of the town, go for it.
As the mom of a candy loving 5-year-old, I think there you go. Turn the library into a candy store, Nancy says. Now that's talk.
Yeah. Well, one of the other reasons that we held programs in local businesses is we were being very intentional about supporting local businesses. Red Hook is a community between two very thriving communities, whereas Red Hook was more blue collar and really kind of struggling. So we wanted to give people reasons to go into the businesses that supported us. And so we would hold, like, knitting might happen in a cafe where people could then also get tea or, a muffin or something that we might not have at the library. And it was a chance to build those relationships out, which also helped us strategically that when we were doing things like asking for help or increasing our budget, we had those deep relationships with people and had worked to support them. So they were more likely to, in turn, support our work. Oh, I wanted to say, if at any point you're in this process and you're wondering or you get stuck, please feel free to reach out and talk to me. As you may tell, I love to talk about this stuff. So, and I am always happy to help and love hearing, especially from all libraries. Do I have a special place in my heart for small and rural libraries? Of course. Um, oh, I love somebody shared. Yes. So that is the return on investment calculator that Marianne shared. That is the resource from ALA through their I Love Libraries initiative. Thank you.
Okay, I just want to call out a couple of threads that I need to tease out here. So, our evening keynote is going to be on calculating your library's value beyond your return on investment.
Yay.
And so, I do hope that people come back for that one, and we can kind of follow this sort of thread of what value does our library bring, and how do we assess what that value is, and then how do we plan and act on that. And then the other piece that I want to say is coming up here in the next breakout, I am going to, I have some sort of, a lot of the things that Erica is talking about remind me of the topic that I'll be presenting on, which is on sort of project management and how do you keep people informed and how do you keep projects moving forward once you have sort of assessed what you want to do, what kind of goals are we trying to accomplish here? You're beginning to build project plans and all of that. So I think it's going to be, I do love to see how we get to see all of these threads play together, almost like we planned this conference, on purpose, that we felt like this was a valuable topic to conference on. So that's really great. Yes, Michelle, it is a reprise of the Caboodles session that I did at ILOC. ILA, I mean.
So thanks so much. And if you have questions later on, I'm always happy to chime in. So thanks so much.
Yes. This has been really exciting. Thank you. Such a great start to our morning. All right. So we for the sanity of state library staff and people who are hosting. Oh, before I move on, I put a link in the chat. I think, did it make it all the way into the chat? Yes. So Erica mentioned the story time in the candy store. Lena Oltman in Rhinebeck, who's the director, that's a small town, kind of sounds similar, hosted a program called RAR, Read All Around Rhinebeck. And she recorded a really neat kernel for us on how they sort of manage some of the logistics of that. So if you, like Erica, want to take your reading program out into the community, do check out that kernel because Lena had some really great ideas of how they promoted and coordinated that program. I think it was started during summer reading, but they kind of carried it on through. So I want to mention that for the posterity of the recording as well. All right, everyone. So one of the things that I love to do with ILOC is see how you ILOC. This is one of the slides that went through. You may have seen it, but I'm going to show you how I ILOC. I am well hydrated. So I hope you can see all of the drinks I have prepared for myself. I'm not saying I won't also purchase a Diet Coke at some point. But I will be caffeinated. I will be hydrated. I hope that you will be too. And if you want to share a picture of your viewing party, whether that is with your staff or your trustees or your pets, you can email that to the continuing ed email. And I like to make a little album so we can all share. Because even though we can't all see each other, there are about 150 of us all gathered together today. So it's always fun to remember that we are doing this in community, even though we're all staying safe and warm in our own little houses. Yes, I'm a big fan of a water bottle, and don't let my husband tell you that I don't need any more, because you always need another water bottle. He doesn't know. They all serve a different purpose. Okay, so we have a little break built in here now. We'll start back up around 10:45. So go unlock the library, shelve a few books, whatever you need to do. At 10:45, come back to the conference website. Let me put that link in the chat. Come back to the conference website for the link to your next Zoom session. In our next session, we will have a session on assessing library accessibility. We will have a session on Excel, which is not being taught by me, although I've seen it before and it's really fabulous. I do love Microsoft Excel. And then there's myself talking about project management and evaluation. So the links for all those sessions will be live on our website. If you have to buzz off for the rest of the day and you are not coming to any more sessions, let me also get you the link to our continuing ed form, if I can. Bear with me. And you can fill out that form for your credit for today's session as well. So scroll, 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 scroll. I have too many tabs. Here we go. So once again, thank you to Erica for this presentation and encouragement. And thank you to all of you for coming. We'll see you back in about half an hour for our next round of breakouts. Take care, everyone. Thank you, Erica.